Welcome back to the Sundowners Club. House of the Dragon, Season 2, Episode 2, titled Rhaenyra the Cruel. Rhaenyra the Cruel? More like Blame Daemon. We're going to get into the episode, full breakdown, and we're going to get into 4 things that you may have missed that you needed to be paying attention to on tonight's episode of House of the Dragon, Season 2, Rhaenyra the Cruel. We're going to do that right now. While we're talking about House of the Dragon Season 2, do us a big favor. Hit that subscribe button. Also, hit the notifications bell so you can be alerted to future content. Leave us a comment and smash that like button. So first, coming off of the events of last week with Blood and Cheese and the killing of the child, the heir to the throne, Jaehaerys Targaryen, we open with a somber violin music, and you've got King's Landing locked down. It's in chaos. And you see kind of that play out as we see people running and fleeing, trying to get out of the Red Keep, but everything's being locked down. We then have a shot of Aemond Targaryen, who was the original target for Daemon through Blood and Cheese, walking into his chambers, and he sees the secret passageway open and looks around, notices some coins were taken off of his table, and realizes in that moment that someone had been in his room and he may have been the target. And then you see Alicent is sobbing. She feels guilty. If you remember, in the episode prior, Alicent was in bed with Kristen Cole, who should have been watching the heir to the throne when Blood and Cheese entered and killed the heir to the throne, Jaehaerys Targaryen. So, a lot of guilt from Alicent and not a lot of sympathy if you're the viewer watching Alicent, trying to kind of play the victim, right? She says she's worried about the girl, which is her daughter, Helena, but it's really makes you feel like it's about Alicent. And so I think that's what the writers are going for there. You start to see Otto Hightower at this point is starting to strategize around what to do with the loss of Jaehaerys. And so he goes to the council and he presents to an enraged Aegon about using this as a way to have a funeral so that the small folk can see what Rhaenyra the Cruel has done to Jaehaerys, this child, and it will bring people to Aegon's cause, more sympathy for the Team Green. And so pretty smart strategy, and Aegon eventually acquiesces after talking to his mother. While that's happening, Larys Clubfoot walks in and announces that they've apprehended one of the people responsible for the murder, and that is the City Watch guard known as Blood. And so at that point, Aegon says he's going to kill him, but they want to get information from him first. We then see Blood, who is in the prison cell, and he gives up Daemon like immediately. He didn't have to be tortured. He didn't, nothing has to be said. He immediately turns and gives up Daemon as the person who hired him. But he does mention that there was a rat catcher, but he doesn't know his name. And so that plays into some decisions that are made later in the episode. We then cut to Rhaenyra on Dragonstone, and she's shocked. She obviously has no animus towards Helena, would not hurt a child, and she's concerned that they're going to lose support amongst some of that great houses, the nobles around this, and she's trying to talk to her council about what to do about it. But she gets some pushback from Lord Alfred Broom, who says he could understand if she would have acted out of anger after losing her son. But while all this is going on, you see Daemon Targaryen sitting over there with a little bit of a smirk, and he's just being quiet. And Rhaenys looks at him, so she knows that this is somehow Daemon's doing. So Rhaenyra, amidst all the talking about what to do with the shocking news of the murder of the heir to the throne, Jaehaerys, Rhaenyra stares at Daemon, and she realizes Daemon somehow is responsible. So she has to get Daemon alone. And in one of the most powerful scenes in the episode, we see Rhaenyra in her private chambers talking to Daemon, and she says she can't trust him. She wants to know where his allegiances lie. Will he accept her as queen? He's frustrated by the lack of trust. and her saying she can't trust him. He gets angry when she mentions that he gave up the throne, and so he lashes out at her. He says that Viserys was weak. Viserys, would not use the sword to gain the kingdom, right, and to be a true king. And he sees the same thing in her. And so you see Damon just a philosophical difference in what he thinks a ruler should be. Fire and blood. Damon is all about fire and blood. Rhaenyra is not. Rhaenyra, even amongst all the carnage that's happened so far, she's still trying to find a way to be a queen of peace, at least to this point. So is there having this bad argument before Daemon Targaryen leaves? One thing he did say to Rhaenyra is that his brother Viserys named her as heir to put Daemon in his place, and that is the root of Daemon's anger and a little bit of vitriol towards Rhaenyra that he just can't get over. So Daemon leaves the chambers, leaves Dragonstone, flies out on Caraxes, and we'll see where he ends up going. Is he going to Harrenhal? And so, after that, we see uh, Rhaenyra, a very interesting scene. Rhaenyra is in the library of Dragonstone, which we haven't seen before. And in the library, she's opening up a book. And I will get into what the contents of that book is at the end of this episode. So you're going to need to stick around and find out a little bit of an Easter egg that was on the pages of those books. If you blinked, you might have missed it. Cut to Adam of Hull again, and this time he's on a beach collecting crabs, and we see a dragon fly over him. And there's a little bit of an Easter egg there too, but there's a connection that we see as the dragon is grumbling and making sounds, screeching, and Adam is staring up, and he doesn't look afraid. He looks like he's in wonder and awe of the dragon. And so stick around to the end of this video where I tell you a little bit about who that dragon is and what it may mean for the future. So we then come back to King's Landing, and we see all the rat catchers have been hung. And as they're showing all the rat catchers, we see Cheese is one of the rat catchers. Nobody knew he was guilty, but because Aegon had summoned for all the rat catchers in King's Landing to be hung, he was one of the ones hanging from the noose. So now we know that Cheese is indeed dead, and he's been hung. And so we see the dog. We see the dog that was kicked by Cheese, and the dog, you would think the dog would be excited, but the dog was sitting there looking up at Cheese, maybe wondering who's going to feed me now, even though I'm not going to be kicked anymore. But a nice little scene to bring the dog back. The dog's okay. The dog wasn't hurt. And we see the dog staring up at Cheese. After we see all the rat catchers hung in King's Landing, we see Otto storming into the chambers of the king and Kristen Cole, and he's furious, saying that all the goodwill that we would have gotten from the funeral and what happened to the heir to the throne, it's been blown. It's been destroyed by Aegon's propensity for violence, just like Aemond, and hanging all the rat catchers who had wives and families, many of them, almost all of them, innocent. And so they have an argument back and forth because Aegon wants action, and in his mind, Otto is not delivering. Otto then says, would you not remember your father? And he starts to have a moment where he longs for the days of Viserys, who he can manipulate, but at the same time, Viserys was level-headed, and you get no such thing from Aegon, especially an enraged Aegon. And so he ends up attacking Aegon, saying that your father was right about you, and that's the last straw. Aegon fires him, removes him as Hand of the King, and gives the Hand of the King's badge to Kristen Cole, Sir Kristen Cole. So now we have Sir Kristen Cole as the Hand of the King, and Otto exits. The next scene we see Rhaenyra going to see Mysaria in the cell, and she decides she's going to let her go free. She's got a ship that's going to send her to Myr, and she sends her on her way. She honors what Daemon had committed to her to let her go free. And as Mysaria is walking down the beach to board the ship, she sees a character walking up, and that character is Arik Cargill, who earlier in the episode we saw was told by Sir Kristen Cole that he wasn't watching when the heir of the king got murdered. So he's challenged him to sneak into Dragonstone, acting as his twin, Eric Cargill, to murder Rhaenyra. And you even have a mention of Kristen Cole telling Auric Cargyle that his white cloak is dirty, which got dirty in the mud from the funeral procession. And so he talks about the white cloaks and what it means to have what that represents. But what you're getting is Sir Kristen feels dirty. He knows he has dishonor, but he's transferring on to Auric Cargyle his own sense of shame. And so that's a very important scene from that standpoint. But he sends Sir Auric to Dragonstone. Masari is walking to the boat. She sees Auric and she knows that something's amiss because she just saw his twin brother 2 minutes prior in front of Queen Rhaenyra. And so we see her turning around to go back to the castle. But at this point, Auric has snuck in the castle. He makes his way into the chambers of Rhaenyra. And before he can kill her, his twin brother, Eric Cargill, shows up. They have an emotional fight to the death. They love each other as brothers. They were put on different sides of this Targaryen family civil war that they didn't choose, and they honored their oaths, and now they're battling to the death. And as Eric wounds and ends up killing Auric, he can't take the fact that he killed his brother. He apologizes to his grace, Queen Rhaenyra, and asks for forgiveness, and he falls on his sword. It's a brutal scene, the best scene of the episode, better than the blood and cheese moment that we had, I believe, in episode one. The Cargyle brothers. It was emotional. It was really really powerful to watch, and so we end up the show with not with that scene, but with Otto speaking to Allison, and she's asking for forgiveness to have sinned. He says, "Don't speak of it," and he talks about he's leaving. He's going to Old Town, and she says, "No, I need you in High Garden." They're wavering, and so we don't know where Otto's going. Is he going to Old Town? Is he going to High Garden? But as they end up communicating with each other, they're kind of on the same page as he leaves. But then she goes in to see Aegon. Aegon is crying; he's broken down, and you would think as a mother she would go comfort him. She doesn't. She turns around, leaves him to his devices, walks out of the room, goes in, sees Kristen Cole waiting for her. These two deserve each other. And she ends up slapping him, hitting him, pushing him, and then they end up going back to where they were at the end of episode one, together in bed. And like I said, two characters that are not redeemable and deserve each other. And so as we wrap up the episode, a couple of things that I want to point out that maybe you missed that were a little bit of Easter eggs. First, let's talk about Hugh. So Hugh is a smith and he's building weapons for the king, King Aegon. But you see that Hugh has a sick daughter and his wife. They're very nervous. They're desperate. Can he save his daughter in time? He's part of the small folk. What will Hugh's impact be if he can't save his daughter? Will we see him play a larger role in the future of the series? Keep an eye on Hugh. We don't know much about him yet, but they've spent some time developing and trying to build his character and the motivations. So keep an eye on Hugh. We also have a dragon that was spotted by Adam of Hull, who we met for the first time on the beach. And that dragon looked really gray. And so if you really looked at it carefully, we've seen that dragon before. That is Sea Smoke, who was ridden by Laenor Valerian, who was married to Rhaenyra before they faked his death, and he left Driftmark. And so, will Adam Valerian somehow bond with Sea Smoke? He certainly seemed like he was more excited to see the dragon than scared, and he had that sense of wonder in his eyes. So that dragon was Sea Smoke. Another moment that you may have missed is in the library. Rhaenyra is opening a book. And so, what was in the book that she's reading that she glances at before Masari is brought into her? Well, if you look carefully, you'll see artwork on one of the pages, which has Aegon the Conqueror with his two sister wives, Rhaenys and Visenya. And we see another page that looks like it's Visenya on Vagar, and it looks like she's burning a castle that has yellow flowers in it. Is that High Garden? Is it some castle in Dorne? It looks like High Garden, but I don't think Visenya and Vagar ever burned Highgarden, so a little bit of a mystery there. But in the page that's next to it, there is writing that you can see, and if you look closely, it mentions the Dornish War, the first Dornish War that occurred with Aegon the Conqueror when he conquered the sixth of the seven kingdoms in Westeros. It also mentions Aegon the Conqueror's Century of Blood. So is this leading us into the Aegon the Conqueror television series that might be greenlit, or is this going to play into something having to do with Rhaenyra later in the season? That remains to be seen, but it was a nice little Easter egg. You always have to pay attention to things like that when you watch Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon. Finally, we have mention of a character that was mentioned at the end of the episode when Otto is speaking to Alicent, and he says, I'm going to go to Old Town. You have a son there, Darren. I think he can be educated. He's much more amenable to being educated. And he's serving as a cupbearer. And so it's the first time we have mention of Darren. And Darren is the brother of Aemond Targaryen and Aegon Targaryen and Helena. And so for those that know, maybe read the books, he's a Targaryen, so he's got to have a dragon. In this case, Darren does have a dragon. His name is Tessarion, a beautiful blue dragon that breathes blue fire. So it'll be very interesting to see how much of Darren we see this season or early next season. But we definitely got the first mention of Darren, who is at Old Town. So those are 4 things that you may have missed in this episode that I wanted to point out. All in all, I thought it was a 7.5 out of 10. There were some slow parts to it, I think specifically around Massaria, and then with Alicent and Kristen. But at the end of the day, I liked the episode. It built some of the characters that will play important parts for later on this season and beyond. And you can never go wrong with the cinematography of House of the Dragon. The music was on point. And again, Tom Glenn Carney is Aegon, doing a fantastic job. He's stealing the show. Let me know what you think. What were your favorite moments of the episode? Would you like? Would you not like? What are you looking forward to seeing most as we move forward this season? Give me your thoughts while you're doing that. Make sure to hit the like button and hit the notifications bell for future content. And most importantly, hit subscribe so we can continue to grow our channel in TCB.